I met my wife, Julia, on a blind date. She was a doctor, always cool and reserved. We ended up getting married pretty quickly. She wasn't much of a talker. The phrase she used most often with me was, "Mark, let's just take things slow." I assumed she just wasn't very good at expressing her feelings, so I spent 4 years trying to get her to open up. Then, an earthquake hit a mountainous area nearby, and she went with a medical team to the front lines to help the injured. A few days later, a video went viral on the internet. In the clip, my wife was clinging to a messy-looking guy, holding back tears as she asked, "Is this how you take care of yourself when I'm not around?" The day she left, I had spent the entire afternoon making dinner. I looked at the table, my heart full of excitement. I wondered what kind of gift Julia would bring home for me. But the food eventually got cold, and when the clock hit 7, Julia still hadn't come back. I couldn't help but call her. The phone rang for a long time before she finally answered. Her voice was calm and pleasant as she said, "I'm not coming home tonight. Don't wait up for me." I was stunned for a second. "But today is—" Julia cut me off. "I'm swamped. Just be good." And just like that, she hung up. I stared blankly at the dinner I had made, feeling a heavy wave of disappointment. Today was our 4th wedding anniversary. We had celebrated it the same way every year. She wasn't big on words, but she always picked out a nice gift for me, even though the expensive watches and cufflinks weren't really things I wanted. I cherished them because they came from her. "Oh well," I told myself, trying to make an excuse for her behavior. "Julia is a doctor. When she gets busy, she can't even take care of herself. This is normal." I reheated the meal and ate the dinner I had so eagerly prepared, sitting there all by myself. The next morning, I was woken up by a rustling noise. I sat up and saw Julia with her back to the bed facing the closet. I sleepily wrapped my arms around her from behind. "You're back. Why aren't you getting some sleep? Did you eat breakfast? You must be exhausted." Julia's body tensed up, and she quickly pushed me away. There was an earthquake in Silver Creek. I have to go help with the rescue efforts. Only then did I notice she was rapidly shoving clothes into a backpack. Her lips were pressed into a thin line, and her eyes were red-rimmed. Her face had a look of urgency and worry I had never seen on her before. Silver Creek was in the next state over, a mountainous region. The situation must have been serious. I was worried, but she was a doctor, and saving lives was her job. All I could do was watch her finish packing and head for the door. I called after her, "You have to be safe. I'll wait for you to come back." She didn't turn around. "My safety doesn't matter as long as—" She stopped herself mid-sentence and left without another word, not even looking back. As slow as I was to catch on to things, I could still hear the desperation in her voice. I stood there frozen. Her safety. Well, it definitely mattered to me. Julia and I met on a blind date. My first impression was that she was quiet and cool. Beyond that, she was perfect. She had a successful career. She was stable, generous, and stunningly beautiful. After we'd met a few times, she suggested we get married. She said she was 25, her family was pressuring her to settle down, and I happened to be the type of guy she was looking for. It was hard to say no to a woman that impressive. So we skipped the dating phase and went straight to getting married. Like I said, Julia was a poised and reserved person. In 4 years of marriage, she always kept me at a polite distance. It felt like there was a thin, invisible wall between us. I tried to get closer, to be more open, but she would always take a step back and tell me, "Mark, let's just take things slow." So I told myself that I didn't need some big, passionate romance. Being respectful but distant wasn't so bad. Besides, we were partners who were going to spend the rest of our lives together. Given enough time, I figured I could get her to warm up to me. I gave it 4 years. After Julia left for Silver Creek, I was a nervous wreck. I was glued to my phone, constantly checking the latest news from the disaster zone. On the second night, I sent her a few messages asking if she was safe. She only replied once. "I'm fine. Safe." I scrolled up through our text history. The screen was filled with my one-sided questions, asking if she'd be home for dinner, if she had surgery that night, if she'd want to visit my family with me. Her replies were always brief, but she rarely refused my requests, so I just assumed that was her personality and I'd get used to it. I sighed, closed the chat, and went back to reading the news. A trending topic caught my eye. Like something straight out of a movie, I clicked on it and saw a video clip just over 10 seconds long. The camera shook for a moment before steadying. Amid a landscape of rubble, a slender woman stumbled forward. She threw her arms around a messy, slightly battered-looking man and held him tightly. Her eyes were red, and as if using all the strength she had left, she choked out, "Is this how you take care of yourself when I'm not around?" Even through the screen, it wasn't hard to hear the joy of having found him again in her voice. The comments were all saying they could imagine a whole romance novel's worth of backstory just from that one clip. Yes, lovers embracing among the ruins. What a moving scene. If the woman in the video hadn't been my wife, I think I would have been moved too. The hand holding my phone trembled slightly. I couldn't stop myself from replaying the video over and over. It was Julia, the face I had grown to adore. So she did have this side to her, this side where she lost all composure. But it was for another man. The video was so popular on social media that I couldn't deny it. Someone claiming to be Julia's college classmate commented, "They were the it couple at our med school. Didn't they break up after graduation? Wow, they're still together. I know them too. After they broke up, Julia stood outside Caleb's dorm all night with flowers trying to win him back." Another person added, "Me too." Julia was never shy about showing him off. Someone asked her out once, and she just told them she had a boyfriend and they were getting married right after graduation. They were total couple goals. I read through the comments, piecing together the love story of Julia and Caleb. They were college classmates who got together their freshman year and dated for 4 years. But Caleb's family was poor. His father was a notorious gambling addict who had even shown up at the school and caused a scene a few times. Naturally, Julia's parents would never have approved of them. Facing her parents' opposition, Caleb broke up with her and left town. After reading all this, I started to wonder if I had the wrong person. Was this completely unfamiliar Julia they were talking about? Really my quiet, reserved wife? Standing outside a dorm all night with flowers just to win someone back? I thought about it for a long time but couldn't even picture it. I went into the study, a room Julia had forbidden me from entering. In a drawer, I found photos of her and Caleb, one after another, all of them sweet and loving. My hands shaking, I reached for a ring box that was sitting there. When I picked it up, I saw a small note tucked underneath. "Caleb, I couldn't marry you." How deep must the regret have been to have the ring all picked out only to marry someone you didn't love? The ring was brilliant, clearly chosen with great care, but looking at it burned my eyes. Tears blurred my vision. Every piece of evidence was telling me that Julia wasn't cold by nature. She just wasn't warm for me. After I composed myself, I called Julia. The first call was rejected. The second was finally answered. I could hear the barely concealed impatience in her voice. "Don't you know how busy I am?" What could you possibly have to say that's more important than treating the injured? It was the first time she had ever spoken to me in that tone. Before, she was always reserved, never intimate, but always maintaining a polite distance. Was it because I was interrupting her and her ex-boyfriend? I pressed my lips together and forced the words out. "Does treating the injured include having an emotional reunion with your ex-boyfriend? Do you know your video has been posted online? Do you know how many people are saying you two are perfect for each other?" The other end of the line went silent. The quiet stretched on. Then, a man's voice broke the silence. "Julia, my leg hurts." Julia's breath hitched, and she spoke rapidly. "Don't overthink this. I'm a doctor. I treat all my patients the same." Then she hung up, giving me no chance to respond. I stared blankly at our wedding photo on my lock screen. After a long moment, I let out a bitter, self-mocking laugh. Julia came back 10 days later. In all that time, she hadn't called me once or sent a single text. I only found out she was back from a news report. I went to the hospital where she worked. I had only visited her a handful of times, so no one there recognized me. I asked a nurse where Julia was, and she told me she was in room 702. As I approached the room, I heard a man's voice, soft and pleading. "Julia, I haven't had your cooking in so long. Can you make me something tomorrow?" Through the window, I saw Julia's face, a mixture of annoyance and affection. "Caleb, you're being such a baby. Why did you have to go suffer in a place like that in the first place?" I got a clear look at the man's face. He was handsome and refined. He looked more vibrant than in the video, though his face still had some scrapes. This must be her ex-boyfriend, Caleb. Hearing Julia's words, Caleb's head drooped, and he looked utterly dejected. "Your mom didn't want us to be together because of my family, but I wasn't ready to give up. If I hadn't left, I was afraid I wouldn't have been able to stop myself from coming to find you." He suddenly looked up, his eyes welling with tears. Julia sighed softly, leaned in, and gently wiped a tear from under his eye. "Okay, don't cry. Whatever you want to eat, I'll make it for you, all right?" Caleb finally broke into a smile and tugged at her sleeve. "Julia, you're the best to me." I stood outside the door watching this scene, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I probably would have never known that Julia had such a tender side. I suddenly remembered the first time I went to find her at work. It was during the first month of our marriage. I had made lunch and brought it to her, wanting to surprise her. When she saw me, she was clearly surprised, and then her brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. "You don't need to do things like this. There are too many patients here. Don't come back next time." How did I feel then? A little disappointed and hurt. So I took my lunchbox and left without looking back. I gave her the silent treatment for 3 days, but in the end, I was the one who made excuses for her. She's probably just worried about me and isn't good at expressing it. If that's the case, I should forgive her. And just like that, I talked myself into a better mood and ended our little Cold War on my own, even though she probably never even noticed it had started. Now, feeling the atmosphere between them, I found I couldn't bring myself to barge in. I didn't want to be the outsider who didn't belong. The next day at noon, Julia came home as expected. She was carrying several bags of groceries. I sat on the sofa and watched her walk in, studying the face I had looked at for 4 years. Beautiful, but unfamiliar. Seeing me, she paused for a moment, then said, "I passed by the supermarket and picked up some groceries. I'll cook today." I didn't respond, but got up and followed her to the kitchen. I leaned against the doorframe and watched her. She really did know how to cook. Her movements were swift and skillful, a pleasure to watch. The woman who had never once cooked for me now seemed like an angel who had descended to earth for the one she loved. Too bad I was just benefiting from someone else's good fortune. At the dinner table, I said softly, "You still haven't told me what's going on with you and your ex-boyfriend." Julia's hand holding her chopsticks froze. She looked up at me. She finally seemed to notice something was different about me. She sighed and explained, "We broke up after college graduation. Running into him this time was just a coincidence. You should stop paying attention to all that baseless gossip online." I nodded, staring straight at her. The photos and the ring in the study were a coincidence? Going to Silver Creek to help with the rescue was a coincidence, and this meal you made for him is also a coincidence, is that it? A dull ache spread through my chest, making it hard to breathe. Julia's eyes instantly turned cold. "You went into my study?" I met her gaze calmly. "Yes, not only did I go into your study, but I also personally saw you and him in the hospital room. Should I apologize to you?" Julia was stunned for a moment, and her attitude softened slightly. "He's back in Chicago all alone with no one to depend on. I was just helping him out as a friend. Once he gets on his feet, we won't have any more contact." I lowered my head and said nothing more. The meal ended on a sour note. After Julia left, I went back to my mother's house. Seeing me, my mother frowned. "Why aren't you at work?" I was exhausted, but still had to tell her, "It's summer break now. I'm an elementary school teacher." It was a fact she could never seem to remember. Just like how, when I was a kid, she would only go to my brother's parent-teacher conferences and never even knew what grade I was in. I sat on the sofa listening to her ramble on. You and Julia have been married for 4 years, and you still don't have kids. Look at your brother. His second child is almost due. He and your sister-in-law have such a good life. I couldn't help but smile bitterly. Did she think I didn't want kids? Every time I said to Julia, let's have a baby, she'd always refuse, saying it was too soon, that she wasn't ready. Now I knew. It wasn't that she wasn't ready. She was saving herself for her first love. I opened my mouth and tentatively asked, Mom, what if I want a divorce? A divorce! My mother screeched, cutting me off. You married up when Julia agreed to be with you. Her family background is good, she's reliable. What could you possibly be unsatisfied with? Of course, I should have known this would be the result. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat. I understand, Mom. It's good that you understand. When will you ever be as worry-free as your brother? My mother launched into another long lecture, repeating the same things I had been hearing for over 20 years. I didn't say a word, just silently despised my own weakness and incompetence. Growing up, I was always the control group to my brother. When she was pregnant with me, my father had an affair, and my mother promptly divorced him. She had originally wanted to abort me, but it was too late in the pregnancy, so she had to keep me. As I grew up, my mother became more and more convinced that giving birth to me was a mistake. She wanted to prove to my father that she could raise 2 sons well without him. But I disappointed her. My brother was handsome, outgoing, and got good grades. I was average, timid, and unremarkable. Because of this, I took every step carefully, as if walking on eggshells. But I still couldn't escape being compared to my brother. My college wasn't as good as his. My job didn't pay as well. Perhaps the only thing that could compare was the woman I married. But Julia wasn't really mine either. I was always the second choice. Why couldn't I be the one who was chosen without hesitation? Was it because I was mediocre that I deserved to just settle? I stopped paying attention to what was happening between Julia and Caleb. It was as if the incident was over and no one brought it up again. I knew Julia wouldn't cheat, at least not while we were married. Her parents were highly educated, and the upbringing she received wouldn't allow her to do something like that. She just couldn't let go of Caleb and couldn't help but care for him. And I, laughably, was still trying to keep up appearances and maintain this marriage. Probably out of guilt, Julia had been coming home earlier and earlier recently, but there were no longer hot meals waiting for her. She looked at the takeout containers on the table, her expression freezing for a moment. Why haven't you been cooking lately? I feigned nonchalance. You were gone so often that the groceries went to waste. I figured it's more convenient to just order takeout. Julia's expression stiffened. She looked like she wanted to say something, but held back. I turned my head away, not looking at her. That wasn't it. It was just that every time I cooked, I thought of Julia, of how she used to dote on Caleb. Every little thing, all the ways she treated us differently, were like nails being driven into my heart, leaving it bloody and raw. That night in bed, Julia moved closer and wrapped her arm around me. I closed my eyes and forcefully pushed her away. I knew what was coming. She was going to go through the motions with me just like before. No warmth, no passion. Pushed away like that, Julia's face was filled with shock. Mark, what's wrong? Mark. It was always just Mark, but I'd clearly heard the tenderness in her voice that day when she called out Caleb. Julia seemed stung by my cold gaze. She suddenly grabbed my hand, her face showing a rare concern. But the next second, she pulled my hand out from under the covers and asked with a frown, "Where's your ring?" I pulled my hand back and rolled over. It was uncomfortable, so I took it off. After I spoke, there was complete silence from behind me. I realized I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Even seeing my own wedding ring made me think of the one she never got to give away. Once the truth that she didn't love me was laid bare, all the things I had previously ignored screamed in my mind. I wasn't big-hearted at all. I couldn't accept that my wife had another man in her heart. Lately, Julia had been acting strangely. Our message thread, which used to be just me talking to myself, was now filled with messages from her. Before, I would have been jumping for joy, thrilled that my persistence had finally paid off. But now I just felt annoyed. I muted her notifications. One evening, she loosely embraced me. "I have a college reunion in a couple of days. Do you want to go with me?" I instinctively asked, "Is Caleb going to be there?" The moment I said it, Julia's body went rigid. "Yes, I was afraid you'd get the wrong idea, so I wanted to bring you along." I thought for a moment and nodded. On the day of the reunion, I walked into the private room with Julia by my side. The first person I saw was Caleb. He was very handsome. It was no wonder a short video clip could make everyone imagine them as the main characters of a novel. But after seeing me, his cheerful expression became strained. There were a lot of people in the room, and the perceptive ones immediately understood. "Julia, this must be your husband, right?" Julia linked her arm through mine and smiled, nodding. "This is my husband, Mark Miller." Some people who didn't know the situation exchanged confused glances, seemingly unsure why Julia suddenly had a husband. Soon, this minor interruption was forgotten, but out of the corner of my eye, I saw Caleb's face turn pale, his hands clenched into tight fists. At a reunion, drinking is inevitable. After a few rounds, someone's tongue loosened. Julia and Caleb were so perfect together back then. They even said they'd invite us to their wedding as soon as they graduated. How did things end up like this? Hearing this, I turned to look at Julia. Her hand gripping her wine glass was white-knuckled, as if she too was remembering the past. But she quickly leaned toward me. "Sorry, we forgot to invite you all to Mark and my wedding. We'll buy you around some other time to make up for it." The table fell silent. Someone covered the speaker's mouth and said to me with a strained smile, "He's had too much to drink. He's just talking nonsense. Don't take it to heart." I smiled nonchalantly, my attention on Caleb. His eyes were red as if he were about to cry at any moment. The next second, he stood up and raised his glass. "Wishing you a lifetime of happiness together." He downed the drink in one gulp, grabbed his bag, and hurried out. Julia instinctively stood up, forgetting her arm was still linked with mine. I watched her quietly, waiting for her to speak. Her eyes were full of apology. "Caleb is allergic to alcohol. It can be life-threatening if it's severe. I'm just going to check on him. I'll be right back." It was just what I expected. I released her arm and smiled gracefully, playing the part of the understanding husband. "Go on. I'll wait for you." Of course, Julia didn't come back. The party had to break up. I stood on the side of the road, staring blankly at the dim yellow streetlights. A single question replayed in my mind. Was there really any point in continuing a marriage like this? My finger hovered over my mother's contact for a long time, but I gave up. What would she say? Probably that if I got divorced, no woman would want me, and I'd end up old and alone. "Look at your brother. He's so happy." Of course I knew how happy he was. His path through life had been smooth and easy. He was our mother's eternal pride, and I was useless. Now even the one respectable thing I had, my wife, was about to be lost. I could already imagine how she would belittle and crush me after the divorce. But you have to walk your own path. I wasn't 18 anymore. The little boy who couldn't even voice an opinion on his own college applications. Julia didn't come home until nearly midnight. I was sitting up in bed, watching her without blinking. She didn't seem to notice anything was wrong, and quickly explained. "I took him to the hospital and came right back. Nothing happened." "Really?" The faint scent of cologne clinging to her told me she was just trying to cover things up. I took a deep breath and said with absolute seriousness, "Julia, let's get a divorce." Her face instantly paled. She rushed to the bedside and grabbed my hand. "Mark, don't say things you don't mean." I couldn't help but chuckle. "We've been married for 4 years, and this is the first time you've ever called me Mark to my face. Should I be honored?" Her grip on my hand tightened. "Mark, I'm just not used to it yet. I'll change." I forcefully pulled my hand away and shook my head. "Once we're divorced, you can make up for all your regrets. I'm letting you go to pursue your happiness. Isn't that a good thing?" She stood there stunned, looking completely baffled. He and I are in the past. I haven't done anything wrong. Why do you still want a divorce? I looked at her calmly. I've seen what you're like when you're truly in love. And every moment I'm with you, I can't help but compare myself to that. I lowered my head and said softly, Julia, why can't I have a love that is whole and devoted? Not a love I have to beg for, not something given out of charity, but a love that is whole, devoted, and only for me. Julia didn't agree to the divorce, but I was no longer willing to live under the same roof with her. So the next day, I moved out and into the faculty housing at my school. It was also the start of the new school year, so I began preparing lesson plans and organizing my classes. A couple of days later, my mother showed up at my door. You think you're a big shot now, huh? Talking about divorce just like that. You think you're still a 20-year-old kid? I let her berate me, my mind a tangled mess. She has someone else in her heart. Am I supposed to just put up with it and stay with her? My mother's angry expression faltered. Nate, but she quickly straightened her back again. That's how women are. As long as she still cares about the family, you just have to endure it. It'll pass. I nodded and looked her straight in the eye. Then why did you divorce Dad when he cheated? To put it another way, if my sister-in-law cheated, would you tell my brother to divorce her? My mother was completely speechless. I didn't need her to answer. I already knew. Because my mother came from a good family and had a strong sense of pride, she could never tolerate a partner with a wandering eye. My brother was just like her, so he'd feel the same way. And me? Average in every way? The only thing I had to my name was a good wife. I could only be chosen, never given the right to give up. Just as my mother was about to say something else, her phone rang. My brother's second child was about to be born. She hastily ended the call, turned, and rushed out. I stood at the door and called out to her one last time. Mom, I'm going through with this divorce. Her back stiffened, but only for a moment. If you get divorced, don't come crying to me when you're broke and starving. With that, her mind now on her eldest son, she hurried away. I stood there watching her disappear around the corner, then closed the door. Julia seemed to have changed into a different person recently. She would message me from time to time, asking how I was, if I had eaten, if I was tired. It was like our roles had been reversed. Until one day she was standing downstairs with a bouquet of flowers, calling my phone. I watched her from the window and said into the phone, Julia, don't do this. Seeing you like this just reminds me of how you tried to win Caleb back. She didn't say anything. A dead silence spread between us. It made me think that if I didn't take the initiative, this is what we would always be. Two people with nothing to say. She stood downstairs for a long time that day. Finally, she sent me a text. Mark, I won't agree to a divorce. After that, no matter how much I pushed, she selectively ignored the topic. I had no other choice but to bring the divorce papers to the hospital. Running into Caleb was unexpected. I didn't realize that after leaving Silver Creek, he was now working as a nurse at Julia's hospital. Seeing me, he showed no hesitation and walked right up to me. Mr. Miller, what a coincidence. Are you here to see Julia? I nodded, unwilling to say much to him. It was a shame they broke up back then, and it was normal for them to have regrets. But why did I have to get dragged into it? He didn't seem to notice my reluctance and continued on his own. When Julia and I were dating, she was really clingy, wanted to be with me every second of the day. It was kind of annoying, thinking back on it. Don't you think, Mr. Miller? As slow as I was, I could still hear the smug undertone in his words. I gave him a slight smile. I wouldn't know. That's why I'm getting a divorce. He froze, an unmistakable joy flashing across his face. Just then, the unexpected happened. There you are, you little bastard, hiding from your old man in some backwater town, and now you dare to come back? A gruff man's voice boomed next to us. I looked over and saw a shabbily dressed, unkempt man. As he walked toward us, he pulled a gleaming knife from his pocket. Dainto. His eyes were bloodshot, veins bulging on his forehead. His target was clearly Caleb, who stood beside me. I've been living worse than a dog all these years, and you're my flesh and blood. You think you get to have a good life?" The blade flashed before my eyes, heading straight for Caleb. Just as I was about to pull him back, a figure yanked him to the side. The knife, which couldn't be retracted in time, sliced across my arm, and a searing pain spread through me. At the same time, the person in front of me wrestled the knife away from the man and pinned him down. I clutched my wound and turned to look at Caleb. The person who had just protected him was Julia. Right now, she was shielding Caleb behind her, comforting him in a soft voice. But then she looked up at the man, and her eyes met mine by chance. When she saw the injury on my arm, her face went deathly pale. "Mark." The wound on my arm was treated and wrapped in layers of gauze. Julia bit her lip, her movements careful and gentle. I looked at her face and asked again, "Julia, are you still not going to divorce me?" Her movements paused. When she looked up again, her expression was hurt. I didn't see you there just now." She said the words with great difficulty. "That's Caleb's father. Caleb was beaten and verbally abused by him since he was a child. I was just—" I tore away the last shred of pretense without mercy. "You just thought Caleb was in danger and you couldn't see anyone but him. That's not it. If I had known you were there, I would have protected you. I wouldn't have let you get hurt." I let out a low laugh, non-committal. I took the divorce papers out of my bag and handed them to her. "It doesn't matter. I came to see you about the divorce anyway." Her fingertips trembled as she finally took them. I saw the corners of her eyes turn red as she asked me, "Even if I throw away everything related to Caleb and never have anything to do with him again, you won't forgive me, will you?" I nodded and pointed to the signature line on the agreement. "Sign it. Don't drag this out with me anymore." Julia agreed to the divorce. Standing outside the courthouse, I looked at the divorce certificate in my hand and finally breathed a sigh of relief. It felt like a new beginning. Julia stood a short distance away, looking dazed. Actually, I thought we would live together forever. I carefully put the certificate in my bag and said with a smile, "Even without love, right?" I didn't wait for her answer. I turned and walked toward the street. I hadn't taken more than a few steps when I heard her say from behind me, "No, that's not it. I probably fell in love with you a long time ago. I just didn't realize it myself. I got used to you chattering in my ear every day, got used to coming home to a hot meal, and got used to the fact that you loved me." I didn't stop walking, letting her words dissipate in the air. A love that comes too late is meaningless. In the days that followed, I kept myself busy. Even though I would sometimes cry myself to sleep in the dead of night, I no longer hoped for anyone's love. I loved myself, and that was enough. But then Caleb appeared. I don't know how he got my contact information, but he asked to meet me. In the coffee shop, we looked at each other calmly. He looked much more haggard than the last time I saw him. "You and Julia got divorced?" I nodded and slowly took a sip of my coffee. He laughed self-deprecatingly. "I went to see her. She told me she only recognizes you as her husband, and that what's past is past." His eyes were red as if he had been hit hard. We were together for 4 years. I dreamed of spending my whole life with her. But because of my family, I gave up the person who loved me most in the world. Later I heard she got married, and I finally gave up hope. But then the earthquake in Silver Creek happened, and she suddenly appeared. I knew then that she hadn't forgotten me. Call me shameless, call me despicable, I don't care. I just didn't want to give up on her again. By the end, he was sobbing. "Why is it that after you two got divorced, She wants nothing to do with me?" I handed him a tissue and asked softly, "Have you ever considered that maybe she's the one who isn't worth it? She had someone else in her heart, but chose me because of family pressure. After getting married, she couldn't let go of her first love. And now, it's the same thing. Perhaps in her eyes, the one you can't have is always the best." Caleb left. A meeting between two men who should have been rivals ended without any hysterical arguments. It seemed like he had just been holding it in for too long and needed someone to vent to. On my way back, I stopped by the hospital where my brother was. My mother snorted and turned her head away from me. I quietly watched her fuss over my brother for a long while before finally saying, I got a divorce. They both froze. My brother was the first to react, his eyes dark as he looked at me. You really did it? I nodded and said yes. He muttered under his breath, Good. A divorce is for the best. I frowned, feeling that my brother's attitude was a bit strange. Before I could figure it out, my mother rushed over, glaring at me. Get out! How dare you show your face here? Looking at her now, I felt nothing but calm. I just came to let you know. That's all. I'll be going now. Before leaving, I looked back at my brother. He was staring blankly at something. I sighed and walked out of the hospital room. It seemed I wasn't the only one with marital problems. Everyone has their own burdens they can't talk about. Julia didn't give up. She would pop up from time to time asking after me. I just treated her like she was invisible. I heard that Caleb had also quit his job and hadn't gotten back together with her. But what did that have to do with me? They were just passers-by in my life. Not long after, my brother told me he wanted a divorce. My sister-in-law, like Julia, was a marriage partner handpicked by my mother. But after they got married, she was rarely home, always prioritizing her career. But he too had once been a high-flying professional. He told me, I don't want to sacrifice for this marriage anymore. He also said, Mom always liked to compare me to you when we were growing up, but honestly, sometimes I envied you. You didn't have to constantly worry about being Mom's pride and joy, so worried about every step you took. Hearing this only made me feel wistful for a moment. We were both just tools for our mother to prove herself. Fundamentally, there was no difference between us. After these two major events, my mother seemed to age 10 years overnight. One day she called my brother and me back home. I watched her lips move, probably wanting to scold us for being disappointments, for shaming her. But after a long silence, she just sighed and waved her hand. Just go. I can't control you anymore. My brother and I exchanged a look, didn't say much, and left that house. We would go back to visit her later, but it was always polite and formal. Our mother-son relationship was limited to just that. When I was 30, I met a new teacher at my school, Sarah. She was gentle, kind, and considerate. I was no longer the one racking my brain for topics of conversation, yet talking with her never felt awkward or forced. We naturally got together. It wasn't a grand, passionate affair, but a slow, steady kind of warmth. Before we started dating, I told her about my failed first marriage. After listening, her expression was a mix of sympathy and relief. Thank you for being willing to try and accept my feelings, she said. I was taken aback, my face growing warm, and I had to turn away. After we got married, Julia finally stopped appearing. One night, I received a call from an unknown number. The person on the other end was silent, saying nothing. The sound of a door opening broke the quiet, and Sarah's voice filled the room. Mark, guess what I brought home? The call suddenly ended. I had a guess who it was, but I felt no ripple of emotion. Sarah was holding a box of scones from that bakery downtown, her eyes bright and clear. Seeing me on the phone, she asked curiously, Who was that? I shook my head, took the scones from her, and smiled. No one important. The past is like smoke. My eyes are only on the happiness I have right now. What you can hold on to is what matters most. Underscore, 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 underscore. Julia's epilogue. The day Mark got married, I saw their wedding photos on my social feed. His smile was gentle, but it was easy to see the sincerity in his eyes. The woman beside him was also smiling, her eyes filled with happiness. I looked up at the wedding photo I had never taken down. He had smiled the same way when he married me, but my expression was indifferent, always keeping a distance from him. When I married Mark, I thought, if it couldn't be Caleb, then it could be anyone. so I didn't invest too much emotion into the marriage. Even though I knew my husband was falling in love with me through our daily life together, I chose to ignore it. For 4 years, he was unwavering in his devotion to me. I don't know when it started, but I began to look forward to his messages, to listen to his little ramblings about nothing. The past I had stored away with Caleb in that drawer didn't seem so important anymore. Living a quiet, simple life like this was good enough. Even then, I felt I hadn't fallen in love with Mark, until the earthquake in Silver Creek. I knew Caleb had gone there after he left. The moment the news broke, my heart felt like it was being squeezed, and I couldn't breathe. I immediately applied to join the rescue team heading to the disaster zone. I was in such a rush that I forgot it was mine and Mark's wedding anniversary. When I saw Caleb safe and sound standing in front of me, all the emotions I had suppressed erupted, and I rushed forward to hug him. What I didn't expect was that someone would record it. Mark found out about Caleb and me. But so what? I hadn't done anything to betray him. I was just helping Caleb out because of our old history. At the time, I even wondered when Mark had become so unreasonable. But his anger lasted longer this time. Before, he had always been able to talk himself out of his moods. Something had changed. He started avoiding my touch, stopped cooking for me, and no longer sent me messages about trivial things. One day, I even noticed he had taken off his wedding ring. That was the first time I felt panic. It was like something was slipping through my fingers like sand. I tried to make amends. So I took him to the class reunion. My intention was to put his mind at ease. But Caleb drank. He had gotten drunk once in college, and the allergic reaction was so severe he had to be hospitalized for days. I was a doctor. I couldn't just stand by and watch something happen to him. With that thought, I chased after him. It was the biggest regret of my life. Mark asked for a divorce. It wasn't a joke. He was so serious it scared me. He asked, "Why can't I have a love that is whole and devoted?" It was then that I suddenly remembered he was always the one who wasn't favored. His mother favored his brother. And I, without realizing it, had also ignored his feelings. He moved out. Sometimes I'd wake up from a dream and, seeing the empty house, I couldn't stop myself from messaging him. I had grown so used to his presence. If Caleb was the regret of my youth, then Mark was the happiness that was right in front of me. But it was no use trying to win him back. For someone with such a gentle nature, he was incredibly firm about the divorce. He wouldn't reply to my messages or accept my gifts. Even when I stood downstairs from his apartment with flowers, he just calmly told me that everything I was doing only reminded him of Caleb. I felt like a caged animal with no way out. No matter what I did, I couldn't get any closer to him. The day Caleb's father showed up, I instinctively pulled Caleb behind me. His father had caused trouble at the university before. He was a gambling addict capable of anything. The moment I saw Mark after protecting Caleb, I knew it was over between us. I signed the divorce papers, and my heart felt like it had been pierced by a sharp blade, the pain so intense I couldn't breathe. After we divorced, Caleb came to find me. He cried and asked if we could be brave and be together. I looked at his face, which hadn't changed much since college, and felt a sense of disorientation. Did I really still love Caleb? Not necessarily. It was just my parents' opposition, the abrupt end to our relationship that left me feeling resentful all these years. But I understood it all too late. Mark's departure was entirely the consequence of my own actions. Later, a woman appeared by Mark's side. They got along wonderfully, and I hid in the shadows like a voyeur who couldn't bear the light. He seemed to have completely moved on from me. Along with his family, he had found peace. He had become a better version of himself. Whenever I fall asleep, I dream of all the little moments Mark and I shared. I see his disappointment in the face of my coldness and how he would pick himself back up again. I was so awful back then. A sincere heart was offered to me, and I always looked right past it. After they got married, I called Mark once, but when he answered, I was speechless. I couldn't bring myself to offer congratulations, and I knew there was no chance of winning him back. The moment I heard his wife's voice, I hung up the phone like a deserter fleeing the battlefield. I covered my face, tears streaming down. He is very happy now, but in that happiness, there will never be a place for me again.